So, I want to talk a little bit about sexuality postpartum and honoring the pelvic floor and what it's just gone through, and also recognizing that we are incredibly resilient. And some of us, at least, will be fortunate enough to not tear and to feel really quite amazing postpartum. You know, even a few weeks later, I've heard of women wondering if they can have sex even a week or two postpartum. So I want to clear up a couple of questions around that. And my baby's going to make a bunch of noise because she's having fun with toys. So as we discussed, the cervix typically will close pretty quickly postpartum, but it can take a few days, a week to start to really close up. You do have the placental attachment site that is healing internally, but theoretically, at least, if the cervix is pretty well closed, the likelihood of introducing bacteria into the uterus is pretty low. I think the 6-week mark is put in place a little bit arbitrarily, but it's not a bad idea to take, I'd say at least a month. I think the soonest that I have ever had sex postpartum was at about 4 weeks. And I think beyond the concern about, introducing bacteria and so on, and, again, looking at your bleeding as well, right? Are you down to the lochia that is creamy, white, yellow colored, right? Is it pretty much done bleeding? I'm trying to do this right now because I'm feeling inspired, but it's a little loud. That's a good indication as well. But we also want to look at our pelvic floor and get a sense of what's going on in there. Is there any amount of prolapse that might have happened? It can be very common to have just a little bit of, especially a bladder prolapse, I think is the most common. Sometimes a rectal prolapse or uterus itself, if you reach in and you feel the cervix and it's closed, but it's very close to the entrance of your vagina, that can be a sign that the bladder that the uterus itself is coming down, a little far into that vaginal canal. So it's prolapsed a bit. And with time and maybe some sepia homeopathic postpartum, and sometimes that will take care of it right away. Maybe a bit of pelvic floor therapy and some of the exercises that I'm going to teach you in this course that will, oftentimes resolve itself pretty darn well. But so taking care with sexual activity, it can be really nourishing and healing, and even help bring some tone back to the vaginal tissues and to those prolapsed areas. And why? Well, this gets into some kind of interesting areas here, but how many of you, when you have sex, are an active participant? It took me a long time to realize that some people really aren't, that they really kind of just lay there and allow their partner to make love to them, but there's not as much activity. Whereas for me and for many of us, we really move our hips into a place that feels comfortable and juiciest, right? And we use our muscles and our pelvic floor to actually increase the pressure and, to bring more pleasure. So that actually can be a great way to get back in touch with your pelvic floor postpartum, and using that roadmap of pleasure to get a sense of where the musculature feels weak and loose, or you're not feeling as much, maybe the nerves themselves are not you're not connecting to that part as well. And there are different ways that you can do that, with your partner or even on your own. So I think sex postpartum can be actually a very helpful and nourishing and even therapeutic activity. And asking your partner, even if something doesn't hurt, having the awareness, both of you, of, okay, this pelvic floor just did an amazing feat and it stretched immensely. And there is going to naturally be a bit of kind of weakness, for lack of a better word, lack of tone in that area for a little while postpartum. So how do we do this in a gentle enough way and considerate way, that we are not causing further, muscle stretching, weakness, pelvic floor trauma, etc. So I think that's, the gist of it. I really wanted to get that out because I think it's a subject we don't talk about often enough. I do see women on forums bring the subject up, but it's a little bit taboo, and I am very much into getting into taboo subjects. Obviously, I have tattoos on my face. I'm a person that's not afraid of taboo. So you'll see me, broach some of these subjects at different points throughout these courses, because it's just, it needs to be spoken about. And from a clinical perspective, there's something beautiful about sexuality postpartum and its therapeutic benefits. So ask your partner to go slow, go gentle, make sure there's enough lubrication, make sure that, clinically speaking, that your cervix is closed enough and that you're not bleeding heavily. Take it easy, especially in those first 6+ weeks, even up to 12 weeks postpartum. There can be delayed postpartum hemorrhage. You can, if you jostle the uterus too much, you can theoretically kind of slough off that scab that forms on the placental attachment site, which is only yay big, but it scabs over and then it eventually sloughs off, and you might get another quick burst of some brighter bleeding again, and then it'll kind of start healing up again, more deeply, just like a scab, when you have a scab on your body. So being considerate of that, understanding the physiology of that, and that, really in those first 12 weeks, if you do have sex, let's keep it gentle, let's keep it slow, let's keep it luscious, let it be lovemaking and sweet, and you can have all your, raucous fun at a later date. And using that as a tool for therapeutic benefit. We will get into some subjects a little bit more in depth through this course, how to connect to your pelvic floor and the musculature in there, and really, reaching in with your hands or your partner with their hand and finding those places. But I wanted to at least get the gist of this out there, and invite some thought. All right.